people.
Sure. Well, how's Dr. Charles today?
Pretty good.
Yeah,
And you?
got on good. You got your office lit up today. Are you in another space or something?
Well, no.
It's all it's,
Something has happened to my setup so that there's more me in the picture, which is not a good thing.
but yeah, but we can see you. That's that's a good thing.
See if I can get some more sound there.
There's some sound somewhere.
Yeah, coming on now.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll get started. Welcome everybody to Brainstorming Our Human Connection. Today we're going to be talking about meaning, and I hope that we is not figurative, that it's actual we, because I'm really interested in hearing how other people have dealt with finding or discovering meaning in their lives. So why talk about meaning in life? I think it's important because it provides the underpinning for the drive that we have to survive. To wake up with meaning not only means that you have a way, something to motivate you to action, but it comes right down to why you're getting up, even, why you're still here. Well, what is the purpose of you being here? That question is one that we ask almost from birth. I mean, in some way or another, who am I? Why am I? What is this thing? I mean, when you think about it, it's really kind of fantastic that in this body, we wake up, or we become aware that we are a thing. I mean, when I think about it, it's rather amazing that, suddenly you're here and you're surrounded by input, things that's coming from the outside. You have light that you're suddenly experiencing light through the eyeballs, and it's stimulating the brain. You have sound, you're feeling cold or hot, or somebody slaps you on the bottom, and suddenly you have all of this data coming in, and trying to make sense of that's a lot of work for a bunch of neurons to try to create something out of that. And somewhere in there, we ask, what's the meaning of all of this? And I think it is the prefrontal cortex that needs meaning. The rest of the cells, I'm not sure what meaning would mean to them. But the brain, part of the brain that figures out things, will ask the question about meaning. What's the point? Where does it go? Where did it start? What does it all mean? And meaning itself is a very interesting concept, to find meaning. So probably the best place to start is talking about what we mean when we say meaning. So I'm interested now in your ideas of how do you define meaning in your life? How do you define meaning?
Well, Lawrence, I think you defined it in a couple of ways for me, which is why do we get up in the morning? What is our purpose? And I think if you're younger and you're trying to get an education and you're trying to get a job and you're trying to impress people or not impress people or impress yourself, you're trying to prove things to yourself. Um, you will move on through that. You've always got a reason to drive yourself, to push yourself. And if you get married, you fall in love, you get married, you have kids, then you've got all kinds of reasons, all kinds of meanings in your life and responsibilities that come with the meaning, that meanings that come with the responsibility. And you go through this process of raising kids and you never have a doubt what you have to do the next day, which is get up and go to work and get up and pay the bills and get up and meet your obligations to your kids. And then you retire, as I did a few years ago.
Mm.
And also you have my case, and I think many cases, teachers, meaning is a responsibility or to students. In my case, it was a responsibility to news consumers, to the issues themselves. That provides great meaning. It provided great meaning to my life and great inspiration on most days and direction. And then I think you retire and you don't have that drive. The kids are on their own. They're doing great. You've got some grandkids that you visit or they come see you, and that's wonderful. And you have some responsibility and you have meaning to lead your life in a modeled way for them. But sometimes I struggle a little bit when I get out of bed. What's today all about? I really don't have to get anything done by the end of the day if I don't want to. The grandkids are off doing their thing, going to school, and my kids are working, and my wife, who's retired, is doing her thing a lot of the time. And I struggled for a few years with meaning, with exactly what my life means now for however many years I have left. And I still have some part-time work that I do in journalism, and that has meaning. And I have a spiritual life and a religious life, and that has meaning. And of course, my marriage has meaning. But it changes. And sometimes at this stage, it's harder to define what the meaning is in my life and what my life means, not just to me, but to the people around me.
You made a very interesting observation among the interesting observations about retirement. And it calls to mind that many people find meaning almost solely in their work. And when they retire, if they don't find new meaning, they're short timers. They kind of fade away pretty quick. Something takes over, and there's a certain sense of it's over. That's the sense I get from people who found meaning only in their work. It's not to say also in your work, but like if that was everything, you sacrificed your family, well, maybe not sacrifice because you were doing something for them, but everything, your self-esteem, all kinds of things, who you are, what you are, all of that was wrapped up in your job. And when you don't have that, and you don't have something else that you can transition to, for example, let's say if you have been a journalist and now I have to wake up and get that done every day. But I'm still doing some journalism. I'm still doing the things. At least it allows you to decompress and have time to find other meaning. So I thought that was a very interesting point about the connection between survival and or continuance, and finding meaning. Anyone else have some ideas about what you even call meaning or what you find meaning in?
Just quickly on that point, I have a neighbor who runs a flooring store here, a good guy, and works his tail off, loves it. His mother worked at the clothing store until she was 102. Wow. And she's now in a retirement center. But his word always is, I'll never retire. You retire, you die.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know that that's true, or certainly doesn't have to be true. A lot of people, my friend Chuck, are doing a lot in retirement. I think I'm doing some things in retirement. But what you touched on, my friend puts really, he plans to work until he can't function, until he falls over carrying tile from one part of the store to the other.
There you go. Sure. That's what I did. Is I retired at 35 for 5 years, and now I figure I'll work till I die. Well, on the theory that most of the old guys that I saw around me, after they retired, they died. And I figured, well, I'm not going to be crippled when I retire, and I can't do anything. What's the point of that? So I figured, well, I'll retire now, and then just work. I got my 5 years in, ha ha ha. So to life, and now I'll work till I die. Anyone else have something else that they found meaning, or what do you call finding meaning in your life? What does that even mean?
I don't have much to add to what Kevin said. Yes to all of that. I do think that being defined by what you do, especially if it's a profession, is not a good idea. I guess maybe it's easier for teachers to transition than for some other people, because you don't have to quit teaching. I used to be teased about all my colleagues used to tease me a little bit about all my handouts. But I was just constantly finding things that were of interest to me that I wanted to share with students that weren't in textbooks. And anybody who's in email relationship with me now know that nothing has changed. They're probably not going to get an email from me without something attached to it that I think I'd be interested in. So I really think that there's always something good to do. Whatever your profession was, there's always something you can do that matters. I'm a little puzzled by people saying that sort of thing, I think it's a risky attitude to have. I think it's probably a good idea to learn it, because you do sooner or later come to the end of a job, but you may, in other walks of life, experience the kind of loss that deprives you of those other things you found meaning in. So you have to have, I think, this overriding idea that there's always something good to do. And I feel fortunate by having been raised by parents who believed that life was deeply meaningful, and that there are indeed universal truths, and I never really went away from that. My life experiences have demonstrated that again and again and again. Life matters. Life is precious. It's a gift. People matter. Relationships matter. There's always something good to do. And, the best thing, cliche, but the best thing you can do for yourself is to do for others. So it's not really about who you are or what your idea of yourself is. It's about what you can do in relationship. That's what life is all about, I think. I've never had reason to think otherwise.
So now that you're retired, and except for sending out handouts, what kind of things are you doing to find meaning?
I'm not retired. I'm a full-time father and grandfather and cousin and friend, and so there's a lot of good to be done in all those relationships. And I also continue to provide mentorship for former students. especially those who are writing and whose writing I can support and reinforce in certain ways. You know, I still do some organizational work that I think matters. There's not enough time for all the things that I could be doing, I think, but the days are pretty full. I don't, I sometimes have to kind of remind myself of my so-called career because there's so much else going on in my life that I kind of forget that there's a campus a couple blocks away where I used to do a lot of stuff. And now I'm doing other stuff, which in some ways, some of it is more meaningful to me because in any profession, there's a lot of busy work, right? And I don't have to do the busy work anymore. I don't have to go to the meetings during which nothing gets done, for example. And I don't have to fill out reports which nobody reads, you know.
Yeah.
So retirement, so-called, really frees one to do more things that matter, at least in my experience.
Excellent.
I don't have to miss the students because I'm still in touch with a lot of them, you know, and I don't mean to pose as some kind of, I don't know, authority here, because I get as much from other people, I think, as I give to them, you know. I'm a lifelong learner. That sounds like a cliche, but it's also true. It's fascinating to me how little I know and how much there is still to learn. It's exciting, you know. I read constantly and listen to podcasts and so forth, and I've never tired of that.
Thanks. Thank you for that. Anyone else have some observation about the meaning of meaning? What does it even mean to you to have meaning in your life? Sandy, you had your mic off. Were you going to say something?
Me?
Yes.
Well, I was listening in earlier, but I didn't really have you on Zoom. So I decided
okay.
But I too struggle with finding meaning since I retired. But, you know, and sometimes since I've retired, I just like to rest. You know, I like to sit in front of my south facing windows and let the sun warm me up. And then I feel guilty, like I should be up and doing something. And then I have to talk myself into saying, no, you're retired now. You can sit here for as long as you want.
Yeah.
But I have to talk myself into it.
Yeah. Well, maybe you like when you're doing that, you like put on some really cool sunglasses and sit in the window, sit close in the window, and then see if anybody gives you some ideas. you might attract some people that said, hey, cool Sandy, you know,
Yeah, right.
why don't you come and hang out with us? Yeah. So tell me about the struggle. You said you sometimes struggle at finding meaning. Tell me about that.
Well, as kind of already been identified here, when you're working, you're so busy getting to work and doing your chores and blah, blah, blah. And I was a social worker. So that career field in itself gave life meaning. And then I retired. I do volunteer work, you know, and some of the stuff, like with volunteer work, I can show up or not, or, you know, and when I first retired and started my first volunteer gig and came in my cutest outfit and so prepared to contribute to this group, and asked the leader, I said, what would you like me to do? And she said, well, would you mind cleaning the toilets? And okay, this is like retirement where I went from a professional
Yeah.
cleaning
But
toilets.
yeah, I've found meaning in cleaning toilets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I learned that from this interesting monastery in Japan. They weren't a Buddhist monastery, they were called Itoen. And when they got started, one of the things they did was to go around to all the people in their community in this new town that they had showed up in. And at that time, when they started, there were just outhouses. People didn't have flush toilets. And they would go around and request people to allow them to clean their toilets. And of course, the Japanese people were thinking, what? It's like nobody wants to do that job. Are these people crazy? What is this anyway? And they explained that the point of doing that was to demonstrate to their community humility, to say to their community, this is who we are. We're humble people, and we will do the jobs that nobody wants to do as long as it's moral, legal, and safe. And I took that as a kind of a life pivotal moment for me, is like in finding meaning, is to do anything that was legal, moral, and safe, and focus on those things that would help others, and that's given me some meaning. So that toilet story brought back one of the many things that's given me meaning in my life. Do you have any other things that have you found meaning in, or that you struggle with?
Well, I do struggle in finding meaning. Since I retired, I have time to go explore things that I've always wanted to do, and like traveling more. And surprisingly, I was always afraid to travel by myself, but ended up doing it and found this courage that I did not know I had,
Yes.
in retirement. So that's been kind of good. But retirement's kind of hit and miss for me in finding meaningful activities, or still struggling with thinking I need to be productive all the time.
Okay, well, thank you. Anyone else have something they can contribute to our discussion here on the level of, what is meaning to you? What does it even mean to you?
I've got.
One
Oh,
other
go
thing.
ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just gonna say, the reason I came up with this topic is because I'm doing a paper on the philosopher Albert Camus, who said that he had a theory of the absurd, which is basically to say that there's no meaning in life, and when you attempt to make meaning out of it, absurdity occurs. And I'm just curious what other people think about that. And the part of it that's really intriguing to me is that he says that nobody's ever proved there's any true meaning to life besides being born and dying. So I'm just curious what people think of that. How could you prove that there's meaning in life through something that happened?
Well, I
Any
think
thoughts, or is that way too deep?
no, I don't think so. I think to me anyway, it's not deep, not terribly deep, but I think it gives another perspective from which to explore the concept of meaning, and that perspective is a question: is meaning discovered, or is it created? Is there a meaning? It's the age-old sculptor's trick, or question. is the object that you're carving there, and you need to take the excess material away to reveal it, or do you take the material which has no particular form and give it form through your effort? So I think we can approach meaning in the same way. Do we find meaning because it's out there that we go looking for it, or do we create meaning because we can, and we can just decide the thing is meaningful and engage with it and give it meaning, and that's as far as it goes. So I'd be interested to hear the response of others to Ryan's question.
This is Betty, who shall remain unseen, I guess, today. Good morning, everyone. Sandy, I relate to what you said very much because I started working before I was legally old enough to, and worked at a lot of different things. And one of the most despicable things my mother said, and she was not a despicable mother, I don't mean that, but she would accuse me of being lazy at times. And that was usually if she thought I was being idle. So that haunts me too in my retirement, but I have reckoned with that now because 10 or 12 years into retirement, the idle time that I sit facing my windows and watching the birds is really productive time for me, because now the quiet and the solitude allows me to work out things that I've never really had time to delve into in my life. So I'm productive in tangible ways too, but it is hard to shuck that off and think, oh my goodness, how can I just sit here like this? Well, do it. It's really good for you. And I'm also proud to hear you say you've found the courage to travel alone. I never did anywhere near enough traveling before, never will, but I do occasionally take solo road trips with my painting equipment and just go afield and enjoy myself. And it's a great joy to be retired.
So what have you found meaning in, Betty?
Oh, everything. I had to limit my interests when I retired because I knew I could not possibly pick up all those things I had shoved off of the work table during my life. So I did a retirement plan as if I were starting a business or a life, and narrowed it down to 5 things, which I really can't name offhand, but aside from family and friends, the thing that I most wanted to accomplish that was tangible was to find out if I could learn to paint. And so I knew I'd have to give that my attention, my focus, put the time in. And that's something I was never good at before. I had too many things going on. So now the meaning for me is to put my focus where I want it and still maintain relationships with people who are dear to me. And also I'm finding a lot of new interesting people that I love in the world. So it's not been difficult to find meaning.
I
Interesting.
was going to say earlier that I think life really is all about finding meaning. I think to respond to your question, Lawrence, it's meaningful, but you also have to make meaning. I studied Ryan and I've had this conversation about the absurdists, briefly at least, and I was telling him that I studied the absurdists in grad school, and I was quite interested in them aesthetically. You know, some of the absurdist drama, for instance, very entertaining, very engaging, very artful. But it's a dead end as far as I'm concerned. You know, how many different ways can you say life has no meaning? I got tired of that. It's just nothing you can do with that besides throw up your hands, kind of fashionable despair, existential angst, if you will, And so in contrast to that, you can search endlessly for meaning. It's all about the journey. You've heard me mention this book before, but there's a book that I taught and indeed used in a honors college discussion series, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And I just highly recommend this book. It's been published in many languages, many millions of copies and so forth and so on. But Frankl was a psychologist who survived the death camps. And his relatives didn't, including his wife, died in the gas chambers. But he came away with, from that experience, convinced that life is meaningful. And he was quite a contrast to his contemporaries, Freud, who thought that life was all about the pursuit of sensory gratification, physical graduation, pleasure, and Adler, who thought that life was all about the search for power, becoming powerful and achieving more power. And then Frankl, against all odds, the horrific experiences he had in the death camps and the loss of his loved ones, came away with this theory of logos. In the beginning is the word, and life is meaningful. It's all about finding the right words to express the meaning that is there. And so I think it's a very inspirational book. And so I mentioned voracious reading. I think if you're if you believe his life is meaningful, then you want to find more and more of it. And you become engaged by writers who can enrich your thinking on the subject and dramatize in various ways that life is deeply meaningful. It's all about learning hopefully.
Learning what? Say that again, Charles.
Learning hopefully. There are universal truths. There's spirit. There's love and honor and compassion. And the more as far as I'm concerned, the more you experience humankind, the better you understand that, the more heartening it is. And you can experience that directly. My friend of some 40-some years, Kevin there, and I have this deep friendship, which I think has deepened through the years. And you that's one thing you make. You make relationship and you continue to add to it. Yeah, I think the more I experience literally via relationship, vicariously through literature, the more hopeful I am.
Thank you. That was very interesting and interesting perspectives. Anyone else have a response to Ryan's question? Is the search for meaning and meaning itself absurd, or do you find value in that?
I spoke at my mother's funeral. She died at 86, and she had a massive heart attack at 81 and all kinds of issues. And last 5 years of her life were in a assisted living center in Sioux Falls. She had been free to roam central South Dakota in her car and have coffee and Al's Oasis and at Casey's Cafe and wherever she wanted to go and drive to Sioux Falls if she wanted to, and that she was isolated and sick. And the last year or so, especially kind of confined to an electric wheelchair with this congestive heart failure and the doctor said to us a number of times that the only reason she's alive is because she wants to be alive. With her heart function, many people would be dead. And she every day sat, Betty talked about watching the birds, and she would sit and watch the birds and out the window and have a meaningful experience and relay everything that the birds did to me. She would watch these kids across the way that came out and played in the afternoon, and she got to know every one of them, and what they did the next day mattered to her, had great meaning to her. And of course, the visits from us and from her grandchildren, every one of those was a gem that she looked forward to, and she looked forward to giving us of herself again one more day. Life was extraordinarily precious to her, and she lived it out until her absolute last breath, believing that each breath and each minute was meaningful.
Yes. I think that drives a lot of the search for meaning, or you know, if one can discover what your mother discovered, I think in that is some meaning as well. And somewhere in there, one discovers or creates meaning. Anyone else? Carolyn, you look like you took your mic off.
Yes, Ryan, that's such an interesting concept that I've never thought about, that perhaps not everybody needs to find meaning in life. So I'm thinking of people who are kind of wanderers, who enjoy life, but I don't know if they necessarily think deeply about the meaning of life. I'm not sure of that. Somebody who's a free spirit. Yeah, I've just never thought of that. That's perhaps some of us don't have meaning to life. I don't know.
Interesting. What does that feel like, or what do you think it would feel like if you didn't? Or could you expand a little bit on that when you say maybe they don't have meaning to life?
Well, there's a little bit of a free spirit in me, and I know a person who's very much a free spirit, and you just go with whatever is there for the day, not planning ahead. Yeah, I'm just puzzled. Can we live without having meaning in life? But this philosopher is saying we don't necessarily need meaning.
So when you say free spirit, I'm not really sure. I
Oh,
understand
that
what
free
you mean. What do you
spirit
mean?
to me is I just do whatever I want to do. I don't pay any attention to the other person or anything. I just go through life. It's not being narcissistic, but it's more this is what works for me. I don't necessarily need structure and that type of thing. So each day is different, but I don't plan ahead to know that each day is different.
So there's no meaning in that to you?
The free spirit of myself says yes, so that I don't need to plan ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, that doesn't have meaning for you?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. That's why this is so interesting.
Yeah. I think it gets back to the one of the first questions anyway that I posed was, what do we call meaning? You know, because I think if you don't have a sense of, well, what do you mean when you say my life has meaning, then we can have a discussion that has no meaning because we're all thinking meaning means something else.
Well, meaning as in, to me, it means purpose, finding your purpose in life. And I don't necessarily think that all of us need to find a purpose in life, though a purpose in life gives us hope. I'm just wandering around with this because I've never thought about that perhaps we don't have to have meaning in our life. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if we describe it and or define it as purpose, then that's an intriguing question as well. But I think the other thing that meaning could be is gratification. You know, that when I do this thing, there is a certain kind and quality of gratification that I obtain from doing or seeing or being, as opposed to it has a terminal meaning, like if there's an apex or something like that, you know, there's a point, so to speak, to it. Maybe there is no point to it, except that I feel that it's worthwhile. I feel that, you know, if you're alive, you're going to be doing something, even if it's sitting in the window and watching kids, you know, and that's a thing. And if you feel some gratification from that, then to me, that's a kind of meaning, you know, but there's not necessarily a purpose to watching the kids. There's no thing that you're going to do. And even if it were, then what's the meaning of that, you know? So I think that's a rabbit hole that you can get lost in, and a maze that you could get lost in. And of course, you could come to the conclusion of Camus that it's absurd, you know, because it's just going down this rabbit hole, and you go, oh God, there's nothing there. There's no there, you know? So I guess I'm coming back to your definition, not saying no flies on your definition. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that, okay, if we qualify that definition as purpose, then I better understand what you mean.
And I agree with your point of gratification. Yes.
So that circles back to what I said earlier in distinguishing between Freud and Adler and Frankl. That's sort of the Freudian school of thought that life is all about the pursuit of pleasure. Free spiritism, maybe. I don't think the absurdists were free spirits. I think they were a pretty gloomy bunch, because they were very depressed by the idea that life is meaningless.
Yeah.
If you're a free spirit, you know, then you're kind of the school of thought that life is about self-gratification. Let's have fun and let's keep having fun. Let's have as much fun as we can have for as long as we can have it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have to put the free spirits in a camp, I guess it would be the Freudian camp, as I've described it.
I also had the same problem with the absurdists, is that I felt that they were absurd, because it's like, you know, okay, so you didn't, you know, it's like there's some main point that you have to arrive at. That just seemed like, yeah, that seems absurd, because how do you do that anyway? How do you say that, you know, that there's some great point? Now, some people, I think, try to create a point like, if I do this, I go to heaven, you know, or something like that. Okay, then that gives meaning to you, because as people feel like, well, if I do this thing, I'm investing in my heavenly home, even though, at least in some scriptures, they tell you, nah, not really, because you don't get to decide. It's not by your works. It's like God decides, you know, whatever. It's not about you really. God decides in the end. It's not like you earn heaven. There's nothing you could do to earn heaven in some interpretations. But that, you know, at least trying gives some people purpose. You know, like there's an end point. That's to them, that has meaning, to give it an end point. A whole point to doing it is so that I can go to heaven as opposed to hell. But then there are others who just say, okay, yeah, but I have to make some meaning here on earth. as well. So it's interesting to reflect. I'd almost forgotten about the absurdist and until Ryan kind of mentioned his Camus question.
I thought the absurdists were the South Dakota legislature, but I guess so. Were
They're still with us.
Let's add the executive branch to that.
Yeah, they're among us. They walk among us, the absurdists. Well, but I mean, it was a thing, and it was certainly an idea worth exploring, as I find most ideas are worth exploring. So I'm glad that Camus brought it up, and that there were people who explored the idea. And now I can know that's not what I want to do. Because if they hadn't, I might have been, I might have been trying to do that myself, but now that I saw what they did, I don't have to do that now.
I'd like to speak to the defense of those of us who watch birds. And thank
Go
you
ahead, Betty.
for your interesting article about the Ronsburg situation. I heard that this morning, read it this morning. I do watch birds. It's not my main focus, but I'm thinking of Kevin's mother, who left her children and her friends a great gift in that she stayed vital as long as she could. And by watching the children across the street and then having them become part of her life, she passed that along to her children, showing them, if they didn't already see it, that she was fully engaged in her life and in the life of others, and not in the way that she had been most of her life. That is so valuable. Who wouldn't love to still have their aged mother sitting in the room enjoying the outdoors and the people around her? So whatever we have to do to get through this, I want to keep on enjoying life that way, and in every way I can too. And I don't think that's selfish nor self-centered. I know it's not, because what I do, my friends experience with me as much as possible. They see who I am, they see how I do, and maybe some can learn from what I do. I've been practicing a long time. I hope I've gotten better at life. So thanks for sharing that about your mother, Kevin.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm with you 100% on birds. And I say this seriously. I think not only do I enjoy bird watching, and I share this with my son, we're always texting back and forth which hawk we saw that morning, and but I think it's important to witness that. It's a pleasurable thing for me, a fulfilling thing for me, but I think it's also important and meaningful that someone be there to witness what goes on out in the wild. And I think it benefits me, and it benefits those I tell it about too.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
It's interesting that often we find meaning in action, but there's also meaning in being, meaning in and I would put that in the category of your mother, Kevin. It's like, okay, now I've had a massive heart attack, and I can't go out to the disco and stay till 4 a.m. anymore, but I can watch birds, and so I'm gonna party till it's the party's over, So and and you can be, you can that bird watching, children watching, and I don't know which one is more interesting, because I don't know, especially if kids don't know that you're watching them, and you're watching them. As they say, they do the darndest things, and you learn a lot from just being. But there's also a thing about watching even plants. The Japanese have a custom referred to as forest bathing, where you go out into the forest and you just walk and be in the forest, quiet, no particular thing that you're doing except being there. And that gives meaning because you start to find your place in the universe, kind of thing, you know. There's a space and there are messages that don't translate to language. So if you didn't do the forest bathing, you'll never get it, you know. But by doing it, there's something that's transmitted to you. And I think that bird watching is the same kind of in the same camp of, if you don't sit there and watch the birds, the person who does cannot really explain it to you adequately. They cannot transmit the sensation or the value that you get from just sitting there watching the birds with no intent of doing anything. You know, there's nothing you're going to do. There's nothing, you know, it's not like going to Colonel Sanders, you know, or something like that. There's no end point. You're just there, and where your mind goes in watching the birds, you know. So it's another reason I think the absurdists were absurd. They missed the point.
Well, and I'll add to that, in this discussion of bird watching is an example of what is obviously to me very important. I mentioned before that I went back to graduate school after having had the experience of war, and so the absurdists were the last writers I could be interested in, because I was in the process of reconnecting and reaffirming some things. And so if you, in the aftermath of war, you don't need a lot of absurdist philosophy. It's disheartening. It's spirit killing, actually. But then I had the good fortune of beginning to read American Indian literature and history and culture. And that's affirmation through Earth relationship. It's all about Earth relationship. We are creatures in a creation, and we're inspirited by our relationship with all that is, and dispirited by separation from it. You know, you can make the case that absurdists spent too much time indoors. Because, you know, the tribal people I read and then began to be acquainted with, of course, there's meaning, deep meaning, and it's all about all of creation and your place in it, and the understanding that these are all our relatives, birds and animals of all kinds. Relationship terms apply in every case, the Earth itself. And that's extremely heartening, I think. And, you know, in contrast to the absurdists, I found in American Indian literature all this hopefulness promised through the pain. And it's always there. And it's extremely heartening. And it was very helpful to me at an important juncture in my life. I think if I have a minute, why don't I share a poem with you that someone just sent to me?
Sure.
Because I think it applies. An old friend of mine named Lydia Whirlwind Soldier, who put it up on Facebook thinking that I would get it, not knowing that I bailed on Facebook last year because I got hacked twice in 3 months, and I've already got too much technological complication in my life. But anyway, Lydia posted this poem on Facebook, and I think it really speaks quite powerfully of this traditional tribal way of thinking and being. So this is the poem, that's short. When my earth life is over, my star relatives will drum and sing a song that welcomes me home. Scatter my ashes in the Wyoming mountains where my ancestors were born, to ride the winds, float in the mountain streams where the birds sing so clear. Let the sun embrace me with its warmth. When darkness comes, stars and moons will shine on me. Let meadowlark tell my story. Let me go where I belong. I'll set for a bird poem. I'm not going to sing. Let meadowlark tell my story.
Yeah.
I love that, you know.
Yes, yeah.
It's endlessly helpful to me
Hmm.
to experience that kind of spirit, if you will,
Hmm.
kind of absolute belief in all that is.
That's a very insightful way to look at meaning. You know, that sense of like, you know, we don't really know where we're going, that abstract place of, you know, afterlife and the abstract place of before life. What was that? And what is this thing that we experience? So it comes back to really like maybe we do have to give it meaning, or we can discover where we are. You know, sometimes it's easy to think that because we cannot put something in words, that it's not a thing. And I think that's a big mistake. I think we over rely on words for meaning. For example, words need definitions. Otherwise, they're, you know, if we don't mutually understand or have some idea of what we're talking about, then I can't see how that's a conversation or a useful one. So but there are so many things that are outside of our ability to verbalize or vocalize that we can think that there's no meaning because we have not been able to put it in words. But if we think about our relationships, you know, if we think about not just relationships with humans, but as Charles was saying, all our relatives, you know, all of the things. If we can just be with that, that's a thing. Jace, you had your microphone off. Were you going to say something?
Well, kind of ditto. I agree with both what you said. Charles, you know what, that poem is really beautiful, and it speaks to my heart as well, because we're taught and we live our lives by getting connected to certain places that are very special to us. And we get a reconnection to Mother Earth and Grandmother Earth by being there, by being at that place. And I can see her poem in Wyoming. I can see that at Bear Butte. I can see that at the top of Black Elk Peak, where you go to reconnect with the spirits and with yourself, mainly with yourself, trying to find that inner peace and trying to find a place where you know that no one is judging you, no one is causing you any harm or anything. You're just staying reconnected with that which is holy. So that's what gives me peace and meaning in life, if I can spend some time to reflect on what I'm doing and what is happening in the world around me by staying reconnected to those places. It rejuvenates me. It also allows me to leave that which is not purposeful in my life anymore, that which is sadness, the things that are causing me to feel bad about things. I'm dealing with health issues now, so I go to Bear Butte and other places to get strength and help with the issues that I'm dealing with right now. So that's it. That brings meaning, wonderful meaning to my life, to be connected to those places. Just wanted to share that.
And I
And
really,
this brings meaning to listen to you folks as well. I
Yeah.
enjoy that.
thank you. Thank you. We're getting near the end of our time. I hope that some of you have, or all of you really, have found at least a catalyst for re-examining meaning in your lives. Just re-looking at it and trying to find or create some meaning, something to do. Life is short, and we can find some interesting things to do, even if it's just paying attention to what's happening around us, like watching kids out a window. There's always entertainment. At least I find there's always some entertainment somewhere. So until next time, next Thursday, same time, same place, I bid you well and hope you find some meaning. Bye-bye.